Over here is our secretary, and he will deliver the secretarial report, which is really a chronology of the activities of the organization in the last 12 months. Purpose, once again, is to report back to you, the community, about what we've been doing. But secondly, obviously, again, is for you to recognize that some of the things we are doing are things that you would like to be interested in. So he will do that, and in the course of his feedback, he will call on one or two members to give specific input. For example, we'll call on Wasila over here, so I'm just introducing the members as we go along, who's been busy with the coffee table book, and she will give us an update on what we've done in the last couple of months. And then we'll invite Najma over there. Najma, we'll see you soon. She's the head of the fundraising committee, and she will tell us a little bit about how little money we've managed, or how much money we've managed to collect in the last 12 months, and talk about activities going ahead. And next month we'll talk about the future fundraising activities. And then, of course, we'll have elections. I'd like to welcome Tarek Jenkins over there, who will be our electoral officer when we start with the elections later in the day. But then, as always, with the AGM, we'd like to make it more interesting than just simply reports and feedback on the elections. And so we make a point of inviting special guests to our AGM to tell us a little bit about an interest of theirs that is an interest of ours. But before I introduce the guests, I just want to say, in the week I got a call from an old colleague of mine I haven't seen for years, and she said to me, I want to talk to you about my nephew. I think maybe you can help him. So in my line of business, I get that kind of call at least 2 or 3 times a week. Help me with my nephew. And I said, I'm happy to help you. How can I help you? He said, well, he's been invited by the Omas to give a talk on Sunday in Salt River. I worry about that. Can't you speak to him, tell him a little bit about Salt River? I said, you know, with respect, Lenore, Africa, I don't think your nephew needs to call me. If he wants to, he can call me. But I think he's more than equipped to find out about Salt River by himself. And of course, needless to say, a nephew never called me, which proved my point. Which then leads me to Aiden Africa, over there. A young man that has kind of made the headlines in the work that he's been doing. And if you don't know it yet, he was awarded the 2022 award by the South African Geographical Society for outstanding work. That says it all, I suppose. What is more important is the kind of work that he's been doing, and so it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Aiden, finally. Tell Lenore, send my regards.
Actually, you know what I mean? When I saw your name on the board, I was like, oh look, is that the guy?
So, over to you.
Thank you. I hope it's not as long as it looks, but yeah. So I think I will start out with a quote that I saw from one of these scholars, and it says, if we need to destroy a part of our city building, then we also need to heal. Good morning to all present here today. I am honored to be in your presence and to talk about the world-creating yet world-destroying process of gentrification, unfolding in many of Cape Town's inner city neighborhoods like Lebuka, Salt River, and Woodstock. Thank you to the Salt River Heritage Society, and especially Mr. Anwar Omar for inviting me to speak at this AGM today. My name is Aiden Africa, and I'm a master's student in the Department of Environmental and Geographical Sciences at the University of Cape Town. As a human geographer, I'm interested in the relationships between people and their places, and how politics is embedded within and productive of these relations. For me, this is highlighted most profoundly in the gentrification unfolding in many of Cape Town's inner city areas. Today, 28 years after the official end to apartheid, we continue to see apartheid-like injustices being perpetrated against vulnerable, previously disadvantaged groups as a consequence of government's neoliberal economic development policies. which have their roots in a coloniality of profound proportions. Today, the perpetrator is the government, and its tool is gentrification. Gentrification is a real threat. It is a threat to the history, heritage, culture, and importantly the memories of the descendants of those slaves, artisans, and fishermen who literally built the city. And many of us in this building here today can indeed trace our lineage back to these slave and artisans, many of whom form part of the Cape Malay, Khoi, and San groups. Gentrification is therefore a threat to you and me. It is a threat to our communities and the memories, heritage, cultures, and histories of the people who constitute them. And so my interest in areas like the Salt River and Blue Cup is more than an academic one. It is about my connection to these places through my forefathers. My connection to these places are therefore both ancestral and familial. From my father and grandparents, the Africans and the Humboldts, who grew up in the Bloemhof and Canterbury Street flats in District 6, to the many who lived in Shelley Road in Salt River. It is in this context and the awareness of the destructiveness of gentrification on our communities that I, last year, an impartial fulfillment of my honours degree, decided to embark on a journey to research gentrification in the Buka and its impact on long-standing residents who have for generations lived there. And today I wish to give you a synopsis of this research and to answer the question, what can we learn from Buka's gentrification experiences? So what was my research about? My research paper, titled Sense of Place, Gentrification Experiences of Buka's Long-Term Residents, foreground the concept of place by exploring how gentrification affects long-standing residents, place experiences, and sense of place. For human geographers, place and people are important concepts. Places constitute significant sites that hold meaning for individuals and communities, whether or not we are aware of this. They hold great meanings for us all and are bound up in notions of identity and belonging. And we need not look further than our homes to see exactly this. For some of us, our homes evoke feelings of safety, comfort, relaxation, and happiness. Our homes are both constitutive and reflective of our identity and belonging in the city. It is a symbol of our citizenship. But our homes may transcend the buildings in which we sleep. For many of the long-standing residents who I spoke to in the Buka, they consider the entire neighborhood home. And for some of us here today, the Salt River is home. It is this relationship that people have with their physical surroundings and the people therein that make us feel we belong in and identify with that house, that neighborhood, that town, that city, or even that country. And so while I can go on about this for ages, what I hope to convey is the profoundly significant relationships that people have with a particular location on the earth's surface. But places change for the better and for the worse, which can negatively or positively affect people's place attachment, identity, and belonging. And as my research has shown, gentrification can affect us for the worse. However, this is not absolute, and there is no, as we will see. So what then were some of the key research findings? One of the things that I found was that pre-gentrification Buka was a neighborhood characterized by a strong sense of community, and that was underpinned by strong faith-based cultural traditions and a vibrant intangible heritage. This strong sense of community and neighborliness is evident in participants' responses who recall how when someone was in need, the first person they would turn to was their neighbors. Or if there was a wedding or a funeral, often neighbors would come up with their numbers, each bringing a pot of food, whether it be biryani or akni, or even a sweet treat like a head soapy or treat of frichi. But this strong sense of community and spirit of neighborliness did not come out of nowhere. It arose from both the shared identity of resistance against the apartheid regime, as well as the belief in Islam and its teachings. As such, these shared values of faith and collective struggle identity are not only constitutive of a strong sense of community within the Buka, but are also constitutive of a collective identity, which in turn is formative of a collective place consciousness, wherein the place and its people effectively become one, and where the people feel that they belong there. This strong sense of community is expressed in and further strengthened by the faith-based cultural traditions in the area. For example, the sounding of the adhan, the ringing of church bells, the visiting of neighbors before they go on Hajj, children parading down the street during Ramadan to take barakachis to their Muslim and Christian neighbors, as well as other ceremonies like janazas and qur'ans. But these cultural traditions are also illustrative of an intangible cultural heritage that makes life in the Buka so unique and special to both residents and visitors alike. This intangible heritage is evident in how back then, residents all knew each other and greeted each other by name. We can see it in the long conversations or skinner sessions, if you want, that are had between residents while sweeping the pavement. We can see it in the streets abuzz with children playing games, and in how shopping at Palmer Butchery was as much a social activity as it was an essential event. There are many more examples like these, but these examples capture the very heart and soul of the Buka. The Buka, the people are the Buka, and the Buka is its people. And therefore pre-gentrification Buka was a time in which residents and the history, heritage, culture and community thrived. And it was within this period that a strong and profound attachment for the area was cultivated. But it was also a time in which many positive memories were made, and memories which would come to be very important in the time of gentrification. But a lot changed when gentrification started to unfold in the Buka. And as we know, gentrification precipitates numerous social, cultural, economic changes. And we see this in the Buka, where property prices and taxes have increased drastically over the last 10 years. We see it in how some long-standing residents have left the area and how new residents have come in. We see it in how the racial and cultural composition of the area is changing, and our shops, which have for years served the community, are now being forced to close, or are catering for different classes of people. These changes have affected the heritage and the culture of the area quite negatively. For example, we see that the area has changed physically and become more modern. We see newer residents complaining about their adhan in the annual Kapsa parades. We see it in the quieter streets, where fewer children are playing their games. And we see it in how cultural traditions such as janazas, hadaks and hajj get-togethers are quieter and less pervasive than before. But the nameless that has come to characterize the Buka has also changed. Residents no longer know all their neighbors like they used to, and some neighbors do not greet. There are also fewer services available for residents in the Buka. Some local shops that serve the community for generations and which serve as important sites of memory, such as, for example, Palmer Butcher, are also no longer there. All of these changes, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem, change how people experience the place that they call home. We can see it. We can see how it slowly erodes the culture, history, memories, and heritage of the Buka. These changes work to displace residents not only physically, but also socially, culturally, and economically. To be sure, the heritage and culture of the Buka is not completely lost. In fact, far from it. But what we are seeing is that gentrification is starting to erode and weaken the heritage and culture that makes Buka so unique. The last important finding that emerged was how all of this then impacted long-standing residents' sense of place and place attachment. And here is Thompson's mixed. Although some residents felt that their attachment to the Buka is no longer as positive as it maybe once was, the general consensus is that their sense of place has either stayed the same or it has actually increased. And so the most surprising and unusual finding that emerged was that long-standing Buka residents in fact displayed a very resilient sense of place. So notwithstanding the numerous social, cultural, heritage and economic changes in the neighborhood, many participants have managed to not only stay put, but also managed to cling to a positive sense of place, characterized by a love that they have for the place called home. And I contribute this resilience to two noteworthy factors. The first is that Buka residents strongly resisted and continue to resist the gentrification of the area. And we also saw this in the news a few years ago, where elderly residents literally put their bodies on the line to prevent construction cranes from entering the area. These acts of bravery helped to slow down what was a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood and protect much of its heritage, culture, history and sites of memory. If it were not for these efforts, the Buka would likely have been far more gentrified, and the findings I'm presenting here to you today would have been far bleaker. The second and very important factor is the role of memory in this resistance. One of the ways in which residents managed to display such a resilient sense of place was that they were able to cling to the positive memories they have of the Buka, especially in a time when the neighborhood was drastically changing for the worse. This allowed them to go back to a time when Boeta Gamma still lived next door, when Palmer Butcher was still a place for residents to shop and interact, when everyone knew everyone and greeted everyone, when their dance could sound loudly without fear of being silenced, and when children could play in the street without neighbors complaining. Memory is therefore critically important. In a time when the culture and intangible heritage of the Buka is being eroded by gentrification, their memory acts as a tool to keep the heritage, culture and the attachment to the area alive. This is therefore a story of hope, in my view, and not despair. So what can we learn from this research and other similar research? What I hope my research highlighted is that location matters and holds profound meaning for people. I could see this very clearly during my interaction with Buka residents, many of whom say that they refused offers of millions of rands because the Buka is own. It is sacred to them. Their refusal to be forced out of the Buka is not because they don't need the money. Rather, they refuse because the Buka is special. Their memories and experiences and heritage and culture and history are all rooted in the Buka and nowhere else. And this is likely true for many of us here in this hall today. This is to say that this is my home and not that. Home is here and not there. Home is Salt River and not Tamboerskloof or Hoodwood. Knowing this means that when the government seeks to develop or renew an area or a neighborhood, they need to firstly understand the history, culture and heritage of the area. And secondly, how changes to the area will affect this and how it will in turn affect the experiences and attachments that people have within and to that particular location. People can't simply be moved at will to make room for a world-class city ideal that excludes them. That brings me to my next point. The attachment that residents in areas like the Buka and Salt River have to the area is deeply rooted in the memories, culture, history and heritage that we find there. What this means is that if we are to successfully resist gentrification, we need to protect that which it seeks to destroy. That means protecting the culture, history and the heritage of the area. And while there are laws such as heritage protection laws that try to do this, what my research in the Buka showed is that these laws are severely limited in their ability to protect the intangible heritage of the area. So we can't rely solely on these laws to protect the heritage and the culture of Salt River. This is why the work of organizations like the Salt River Heritage Society is so important, and why we need to support them and others like them. They do what heritage protection laws are unable to do, and that is to protect the intangible heritage of the area, to protect that which makes places like the Buka and Salt River felt safe with life. But we can also protect neighborhoods like the Buka and Salt River by doing our best to keep as many long-standing residents in the area as possible. After all, our heritage, our culture and our memories of the area are embodied and kept alive in those who live in it. And I acknowledge that it's not easy, nor financially possible, to continue to live in gentrifying neighborhoods. But it is important that those who can stay, do stay. What I think my research in the Buka illustrates is that gentrification can be countered, it can be slowed down, but only if the community is united by the common goal of resisting it. And I want to emphasize this point. You know, in a country with a government characterized by ineptitude and selective hearing of the concerns of its people, community-level mobilizations are particularly important and useful ways of countering processes like gentrification. We saw this in the Buka where the elderly blocked those trains. But I do not wish to romanticize these struggles of resistance, many of which are dangerous. But it is important to note that these struggles matter and that they have political power. To rely on the government with the hope that they will do something is, in my view, a mistake. Yes, we need action at the level of government too, but we need even more the mobilizations and actions of a united community. Maybe then will government wake from its slumber and do something. Before I end my talk today, and I know I've said a lot, I would like to return to the notion of memory, which I alluded to throughout this presentation. Memory holds great power, and it is the one thing that ties together heritage, culture, and history. As the scholar McDowell notes, memory and the act of remembering is tied inexorably to our sense of identity. But it is also an inherent part of the heritage process, as we remember the past in light of our present needs and aspirations. Without memory, a sense of self, identity, culture, and heritage is lost. I've already mentioned how people hold memory, but the landscape also holds and reflects some memories. For example, when Buka residents look at the building that was once Palmo, certain memories are evoked. The same might be true for some residents here today, when they walk past the Palace Bicycle, for example, or past the Lilies Field in Shelley Road that held many Derby days. The landscape therefore speaks, and it acts as a storehouse of collective and individual social memories. In a city where much of the history, heritage, culture, and memories of the city's First Nations people remain invisible and concealed by the history of white Anglo occupiers, the Buka, Salt River, and places like even the River Club are some of the few areas that display the history, heritage, culture, and memories of our forefathers. And this should be celebrated and protected and not destroyed. But gentrification threatens this. It threatens to erase the memories and by extension the history, heritage, culture of the descendants of those who built the city. But it also destroys our ability to heal from the world-destroying period of apartheid. And places like Salt River and the memories that they hold are an important part of this healing. Now, I'm not against development or any change, and I'm sure that many of us here can agree on that. But any development of the city must be able to include all its citizens, must be able to protect all its citizens, and it must importantly allow for women. It has to benefit on defined by Mr. Faisal and Shelley Street, while still protecting their memories and the healing that these memories afford. Therefore, the fight against gentrification is foremost a fight to protect our memories and the heritage, culture, and history that this supports, and which are held in places like the Salt River and Buka. Resisting gentrification, therefore, allows for two outcomes, both which are very important in my view. It allows us to protect our memories and the history, culture, and heritage it holds, but it also allows us to heal from the injustices of our colonial past. I therefore return to the quote with which I started. If we need to destroy as part of our city building, then we also need to heal. Thank you.